Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, 25 years serial tech entrepreneur, CEO, 30 ventures under my belt with 20 failures and 10 wins. And I'm currently the CEO of Sonatify Technology. Today, we are joined by Bryan Guinn out of San Antonio, Texas. Bryan's got a phenomenal background from engineer to founder and CEO, CTO, board member, angel investor, a real expert in the federal defense, public sector industry. Bryan, so nice to have you.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. Bryan, please give our listeners a couple-minute background of the journey of your career.
Yeah, sure. So actually started out, kind of grew up with computers around the house. My dad had a Commodore 64 he was running spreadsheets on in the early days. And so I always had technology available to me. I got into computer repair in the late 90s, mostly reloading Windows 95. Ended up moving to San Antonio in 2000, working for Earthlink, actually, helping run an operation. We were managing about 500 BlackBerry Enterprise servers, about 150,000 end-user devices across all of North America. And that led me to say, you know what, these BlackBerry servers break a lot. Providing consulting services around this could be potentially lucrative. In Section 03, I acquired a small IT company, ended up converting it into a managed IT services company by 2007, big gold Microsoft partner. We were 4-time Microsoft Community Connections Partner of the Year. We were a tier 1 cloud service provider, reselling Office 365 and Azure. Actually, we migrated a lot of state, local government agencies to Office 365 for Microsoft. I sold that company in 2017, wanted to do something new, and started consulting with more emerging technologies, companies that were looking at different ways to take product to market or understand how to bundle services and product offerings together, something we'd done a lot with the company previously. And in 2018, actually, I met my current CEO or founder, Sam, who was just gotten out of the Air Force and learned about the Small Business Innovation Research program that the government had. It's actually a program been around since the 80s. And started helping companies go after non-dilutive government research and development dollars, help them further these emerging products and ultimately take them to production. So really spent the past about 6-7 years focused in that space, and excited to talk more about that today.
Well, Bryan, thank you for sharing that. And, I had to look up what the SBIR program was, and that's been around a long time. Are you seeing, and obviously a big part of what you do is consult companies how to utilize it. How come I didn't know about this? How come more people don't know about this program that's been around for such a long time?
Yeah, I think it's a couple pieces, right? Like, again, so it's been around since the 80s. The Small Business Administration manages that program. I think what's really changed in kind of in that 2018 timeframe, gentleman Dr. Will Roper was in the Air Force, really pushing modernization, innovation, how we bridge the gap in Silicon Valley and the defense space. And they created a different version of the program, which is called Open Topics. Historically, it was all done via specific topics. And what that meant was the government would ask for a specific thing, and then a group of really smart people, PhDs, others would propose how they could research and build something really from the ground up for the government. The problem with that approach was that very little of it transitioned to production. So only about less than 1%. Think about it in the context of the Department of Defense. 3.2% of the DoD's entire budget is spent through this program on an annual basis. When you're transitioning less than 1%, that's not a real great return on investment. So they pivoted to say, instead of the government always asking for things that they believe that they need or know that they want, why not allow commercial industry, who's really good at innovating, go out and propose how they could solve known defense needs. And so they created what's called an open topic. And the Air Force Space Force was really the two big drivers behind that. And that enabled industry to say, hey, I have cool technology. We know that you have a defense need based on news articles, other information that's coming out that's publicly available. And we believe that our commercial technology can actually help solve your defense need. And now these companies are able to propose. And that's really been the acceleration behind the program. But even with that, there's still a large education component involved in letting companies know that it exists.
So as your role as CTO of SBIR Advisors, what's your main mission?
Yeah, so, Silver Advisors, we're a firm made up of former DoD acquisition and contracting folks. So we've got about 45, 50 consultants, all full-time folks that work for us that actually consult with our clients. I've got about 180 active companies that we're working with at any given time. We've helped over 400 companies win upwards of $750 million in funding through this program over the past four plus years that we've been in business. And so a lot of it is really kind of aligning the technology with the government use cases. And so in my role, I sit on creative research and development agreements that we have with government, partnership and intermediary agreements that we have with government through academia, to where I actually get requirements given to me by the government that I will go and scout novel technologies that could help satisfy those use cases that they've given me. And so in my role as CTO, it really is more of being in the field, going out and talking to companies who are developing novel technology, understanding on the back end how that relates to an actual government requirement, and then making the connection from a technical perspective to say, hey, this technology actually could solve this use case. There's certainly some adaptations that need to happen to it for it to work and to fully satisfy that use case. Here's what that kind of rough scope of work or milestones would kind of look like, but then really aligning it from a technical perspective.
So Bryan, you've worn a lot of hats throughout your career, from engineer to founder to investor. How did you land as CTO of your current firm?
Yeah, so technology has always been a passion of mine. Obviously, I do have a heavy engineering background. I think in the current role, it was really designed around me performing those tech scouting duties to be able to go out and understand the technical requirements of what the companies had that aligned to the government side and be able to talk the technology. I've also been part of implementation teams over the past 5-6 years where we've actually executed on these projects post proposal submission and selection. And so just helping really guide them through that kind of high level technical. I also advise the clients, when you work with the government, there are different security approvals you're going to have to get for your software or hardware to run on a government network. There's a couple different paths. People have probably heard of things like FedRAMP, right, as one accreditation path that you go through. There's also an authority to operate. So if I'm not a SaaS product, but I'm actually deploying on-prem, maybe in that customer's cloud environment where they're going to manage the software themselves, I'm going to have to be included in that boundary, which means I'm going to have to go through some other security approval steps and kind of guiding companies on when the right time to start those processes based on kind of the current iteration of their product, how mature it is. There's also a role that I play in really advising them from a technical perspective to be prepared for ultimately go into production once they've executed on their initial R&D with the government.
So, and man, I know this might not be an easy answer. It's probably very in-depth, but is there a high level of what you would need to qualify for this non-dilutive capital? So certainly, as you mentioned, depending on what your product is, you may have to be FedRAMP compliant or other compliant things. Is there kind of like a real high level of what you'd need? I mean, US-based company. What?
Yeah, it's actually, so this program is actually really nice because the whole idea, again, is to bridge the gap, right? I've got novel technology coming out of the Valley or other places. How do I get that into an environment where we can start to prototype with government? And so typically when you're doing these projects, it's kind of a 3-phase approach. Phase 1 is usually a feasibility study, like, hey, is this solution really going to solve your defense need? Phase 2 is more about adapting or building, further developing a prototype. And then phase 3 is really about like transitioning that to production, right? Fully integrated into the customer's environment. The idea here is that all this is done, unclassified work, that we don't need to have cleared personnel. I don't have to go through these rigorous security reviews on the front end. Because I'm not working on necessarily the government network and when I'm developing these prototypes and building this out. So the requirements actually to participate in the program is simply that you're under 500 employees and that you're 51% US owned. Those two are the core requirements of the program. There's some other small ones like the principal investigator or your lead PM on the project. They need to be a full-time employee with the company. But other than a few minor details, there's not any like accreditations, like you don't need to be SOC 2 compliant or anything like that in order to participate. Because again, this is supposed to be kind of early stage R&D. I'm doing my initial work with the government. And now as I go to transition it, then yes, maybe if it's a SaaS product, I need to look at FedRAMP. Maybe if I'm going to provide a container image to my client and the government customer, and they're going to deploy it, maybe I do need to go through their authorization process. But those typically come towards the tail end. So the idea here is to lower that barrier of entry. So there's no past performance required by the company. Again, under 500 employees, 51% US owned, you're eligible. You don't need to worry about all those other things that traditional government contractors would go through. And so the idea, again, is to lower the barrier of entry to bring in more early stage technology.
So best case scenario, you have a product, you enter in this program, it's accepted. How long, best case scenario, how long to get the non-dilutive capital that this program offers?
Yeah, so this is all about rapid prototyping and fast funding. And so from the time that you submit the proposal and that window closes, so they'll run a window, right? You'll have 30 days and they open to allow you to submit proposals. And during that time period, when it closes, they're typically awarding contracts 60 to 90 days post-award, and you're getting your first invoice submitted and then receiving funds from the government 90 to 120 days from the time that you submitted your very first proposal. So very rapid when you think government contracting, not the typical 12, 18, 24-month timeline. The idea is get this in the hands of those that need it quickly to start that prototype.
Is there a typical percentage of proposals submitted that are accepted?
Yeah, so in a giving round, the program's grown in popularity. For as many companies that I go talk to, I'll go to CES or RSA, other conferences. There's many companies I talk to that do know about it. There's still a lot that don't. With that said, in a given round for these larger phase 2 contracts, which are about $1.25 million for 12 to 18 months of work, depending on how long you need, those will typically kind of be structured such that the companies can go after them, get that award in 90 days, and then from there they're able to begin the work and start executing on it.
Like for a given project, is there typically dozens or hundreds or thousands of proposals submitted for that?
They'll get about maybe 12 to 1,300 proposals, and they're going to award probably 70 to 80 awards in a given time period.
Okay.
They're really evaluating it based on 3 pieces of criteria. So commercialization, like how well can this product be commercialized in commercial markets? Also the company's ability to commercialize product. Then look at the defense needs. So is it solving a problem we know that exists that's real? And then finally technical merit, both of the team that's building the product, but then also the product itself. And so you just need to score really well in kind of those 3 criteria areas to ultimately get down selected.
Okay. Now, you previously mentioned that some current projects you're working on are leveraging AI for research and proposal writing. Is that to help accelerate this process and increase the chances for companies?
Yeah, so we work with some companies who have actually trained models on the FAR and the DFAR, which really govern all acquisitions, right? And the goal here is to be able to take these really large contracts, or even when they're doing RFI, RFPs, instead of having to have someone go in and actually create all of that content, to be able to train these models to understand where they need to be from a positioning perspective, what are past examples of similar type agreements, and actually be able to generate those. And so we've seen, an Army contract review that say take a contracting expert 4 hours. These models can be trained with high fidelity to be able to review those in under an hour and catch red line, fallback points and everything else to the same quality as that contracting specialist. So as we think of future conflict, rapid acquisition, AI is going to have to be part of that process just to help streamline that and increase efficiencies as much as possible when it comes to acquiring capability for our warfighters.
Gotcha. Interesting. So in your current model today, do you have direct engineers that work for your team, or that's more to the clients you are advising?
Yeah, it's really to the clients that we're advising. And then we have, partners that if they need additional resources, we can also help, kind of make those introductions so they can collaborate. So you'll often see teaming, right, where one small business may have a really strong product, you may have another small business that has a really strong domain expertise, understanding that customer's mission set, kind of putting those 2 together really helps create a better solution in the back end that ultimately gets acquired, right? Which is the end goal, is to transition this from research and development to production.
Gotcha. Interesting. So as a CTO in 2025 and with your current role, what's the biggest challenge you're facing now?
Yeah, it's really, part of it is just this kind of rapid change in the technology ecosystem. When we look at AI specifically, some paths before previously, or like even internally, like we had some models that we built and maintained for a period of time because there wasn't other solutions out there that could help us with proposal writing or evaluations of proposals with specific criteria that we wanted. As time has gone by, you started to see now they're like commercial off-the-shelf solutions that I can go buy today that I couldn't go buy a year ago. And now the question becomes, is my investment in that original solution that I built worth maintaining, or am I better off transitioning to another commercial off-the-shelf solution and procure it? And so, we kind of see that from all sides, right? Just with the
It's
rapidly
changing rapidly. It's hard to keep up.
It is. And I think that's the big piece, right? I think understanding too how we actually really start to integrate and leverage quantum, both from an encryption, protection of, tunnels and other things like that to kind of help prevent the harvest now, detect later type scenarios. So those would be some of the big areas that we're seeing when we have government customer relationships. Now, I also deal on the hardware side. So, right now, if you look at the conflict in Ukraine, places that, drone, UAS, like that's a hot topic area. And so we're seeing a lot of new technology push kind of the forefront when you think about precision navigation and timing, like GPS alternative. And so it's interesting, but trying to keep up with it all as it's rapidly changing and AI is driving a lot of that is certainly like the part that requires the most study and research.
Gotcha. I'm sure you've seen a lot of cool stuff in the role you do and the different companies you get to span and helping them submit it to this government program. Tell us some stories of ones you could talk about. Understanding a lot are confidential or classified.
Sure. Yeah, there's been several, right? And so, in my early days when we first got stood up and got running, one of the groups that we were working with is an Air Force program called Kessel Run. They were based out of Boston. They were actually a very innovative, forward-leaning software factory where they were developing applications and trying to release that to production very rapidly. When you think of traditional development in the government, you could be talking a 6-month lead time from the time I run a feature till that's actually available to my end users. And they were pushing code every 2 weeks. And we were part of that process because we had a product that would actually do vulnerability management for them. It could cross-correlate static and dynamic scan results, give them a single pane of glass on the vulnerability data so they knew if a critical high vulnerability was actually exploitable, they could triage it in the right way and then iterate quickly with the developers and then push the code back out. And that was funded through a SBIR program effort. Ultimately, actually, that went to the F-35 Joint Program Office, and they started leveraging that technology as well. We've had some others, not as tech-related, but when the F-35 goes out on a mission, it comes back, you got to extract all that mission data. And so there's a large console that sits there on the tarmac next to the jet, and cables get connected up, all the fiber and everything else to that. But that system was overheating because those cables run across the ground in really hot conditions, or maybe get 20 minutes of runtime. And so one of the companies that we work with created they had a neoprene material that they use for tablets and phones, help in extreme hot or cold to preserve battery life. That same material actually worked great to wrap that cable that ran between the console and the fighter jet and actually extract that data, giving them well over an hour of runtime, enabling them to actually extract all the data in one shot, turn that plane to get it back up again. So these are some of the more advanced, novel ways that we've seen it, but with kind of everyday solutions, right? And so really when we talk to companies, it's really about any type of technology, any type of capability that they have, just figuring out if there's application on the government side. And that's really my role, right, is to kind of help sort through those technical requirements to see where they're fit.
So what type of companies should consider the SBIR program? What are kind of the best fits? Who should be opening their eyes to that their product could be a fit for this?
I say any company that's considered taking venture capital equity should take a look at this program because this is non-dilutive funding. This money is available to do research and development, progress, and build product capabilities. You don't have to give up equity to take this money, right? The government does not take any equity.
What products are best? Is there a niche in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it can really, it's a pretty wide range. Anything from wearables to hardware type capabilities. It can be computers, tablets. What we see a lot right now, the interest is in like how do they better leverage AI? How do they better leverage quantum capabilities? And then I think there is still a big driver around anything, and AI plays into this, right? But detection models for drones, UAS, even birds, right? And birds are a massive issue for airplanes when they run into them. That can be a very expensive engine replacement. So those types of technologies tend to be very popular right now.
Gotcha. So that's great advice, Bryan. Anyone out there looking for venture capital, private equity, sounds like they need to evaluate if the SBIR program would be a good fit. Bryan, really appreciate you getting uncensored with us today. I think the information you're providing is a new twist that perhaps a lot of our audience isn't aware of. Any final shout outs, advice you have for tech leaders out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, keep fighting the good fight, keep trying to stay up on current technology. Definitely, if you're a builder in the space, go look at what this program can do for you, both to provide non-dilutive funding and open a path to sell into the government if you're not already doing that today, bringing those capabilities to them.
Excellent. Bryan, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. Stay bold and keep building. Thank you.